today's video is going to be all about lighting and product lighting as well, but you can apply these techniques for any scene that you want. So we'll do a studio lighting setup, we'll do like a dark and moody setup. I'm going to go over gobos, so static and animated gobos, as well as how to control them. I'll do some more detail stuff with spotlights and how to get a more realistic look on your spotlights and shadows. And I'm also going to do an outdoor sunlight type of scene if that's the vibe you're after as well. And finally, I'm also going to show you how to organize all of these things using the sequencer and sublevels and all of that stuff, as well as the basic project setup. So it's a big one, but I reckon it's going to be super useful and hopefully you guys like it, and let's get started. Okay, so I'm in Unreal Engine 5.4.2, and in this version they have fixed the crashing bug with this menu, so now we don't need to worry about that anymore. So a super quick scene breakdown. I've just got this studio background and I've just imported my product here as an FBX, so I use the file import into level tutorial and then selected my FBX, and in the options menu you can choose to import it as a single blueprint, and what that does is it makes this guy, which you can then also update. You can like re-import, so if you make modeling changes you can update your model, and what that does is it makes this blueprint actor, which is where I've applied all my materials in this, which means when I'm in any level I can just drag in this guy. Where is he? Yep, he's over here. Let me go back to him. I can just keep dragging out as many as I want, and they have their materials applied and everything is contained in a single blueprint actor. You don't have to do that method, that's just what I chose to do for this one. And as for materials, I'll just go into it real quick. I'm just using a simple anodized metal for the lid, and then I'm using a brushed metal for the bottle. And then these text elements are decals that I made in Illustrator, so I just went online, found a similar font, and then export that out as a PNG, or you can just export out as a JPEG and then plug in your alpha maps. But anyway, that's not the focus of this tutorial. We're going to go over how to set up product lighting. So I'm assuming you've got your model ready, and we'll also be setting up cameras, and I'm going to show you how to organize a bunch of different lighting scenarios within one project. So I'm just in a blank fresh level, and I've just got, again, my studio background and my bottle, and I'm just in unlit mode right now because I have no lights in the scene. So just so you can see what's going on, I will go to unlit. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is just add a base light just so we can see what's happening. So I'm just going to go to the top menu, drag in a rectangular light, and I'm going to zero out the coordinates. And my object is placed at the origin, except I've just moved it a little forward, so that way I know where everything is. And I'm just going to move this guy up and down, or rotate it down, go out of game view. You can do that by pressing G, by the way, and just move this guy up. Cool. So the first thing we're just going to quickly do is set up our camera. So to do that, I'm just going to go back to this menu, go to cinematic and drag in a cine camera actor. And for some reason, it is not dragging onto my background, and I reckon it might be because it is a 2D object, so there's no collision. So I'm just going into wireframe view here by pressing Alt-2, by the way. So I'm just using these shortcuts to swap between these three main modes. So I encourage you to do the same. So I'm just gonna zero out my camera coordinates and drag it back. To get a little split view action happening, I'm just gonna select this button right here. And for you, it might just go into quads instead of like a two pane view. And to change that, just go up to this little menu button on the top left, go to layout, and then select two panes, and then that'll have this set up. And in this viewport I'm in default, and then on my left viewport I'm in cinematic, and then I'm just going to select my cine camera actor, change it to a square aspect ratio. So I have a bunch of favorites selected here, so you can watch my 3D art project template video if you want to learn how to add favorites, but really you just right click anything, add to favorites. So you can also type in aspect ratio and that'll come up. So a square aspect ratio is just 1. And I'm going to go Alt-4 here to get my lighting up and turn on my grid. And now I'm just going to select the camera, move it up a bit, maybe there. And then also change the focal length to 75. And then hit G on this guy so that we're not seeing the grid on the floor or anything. And that should be pretty good for now, actually. So just like a classic studio product shot, and then disable that. Cool, so we have our base camera set up, and let me just move the light a little, maybe that way, or like point it at this guy, just for now. Now the first thing we'll do is just check a couple project settings that will help you guys out, or just make sure you have. So just go to your edit, project, nope, that's editor preferences. Go to edit, project settings, and then just type in ray. And then I just have my hardware ray tracing enabled. The next thing I have is in my ray lighting mode, I have hit lighting for reflection. So that'll be higher quality lumen reflections. And I've also got use hardware tracing when available. So those are just the main things I have selected and that you need to worry about for this. And obviously I have lumen enabled, but that should be on by default. And the next thing we want to do is also just make sure you have any of your plugins enabled, like the motion design mode, like that one, and then the modeling mode as well. Modeling 1L, the modeling tools editor mode, just in case you need to edit things on your object or your product. Now the next thing, obviously, which is super important, is our post-process volume. So go up to this menu, go down to volumes, and then find the post-process volume and drag that guy in. And I'm just going to zero out that coordinate and move it behind us. And if you want to figure out how I moved with my object like this, so if you're moving it and then you hold shift, you will move with that object. So your camera will kind of be attached to it. So really useful sometimes if you don't want to move around too much. The first thing we'll do is, as you can see, I have a few settings favorited here, but the first thing you want to do is type in infinite extent unbound, and then select that so it encompasses our whole scene. And any setting you see that I maybe don't mention where it is, just type it in and it should be fine. The next thing I'll type in is exposure. So I like to set my min and max EV to 0, and then change my exposure compensation to 0 as well. That way we'll have no auto exposure. Then I'll type in bloom and maybe leave that at 0 as well. And then lens flare, so I'll just type in flare, change that to 0 for the lens flares, so no lens flares. And that should be it for the brightness settings. And now the next settings we want to change are the lumen ones. So obviously our global illumination, our GI will be lumen, and our scene quality, I'm just going to up that to 2. Scene detail, I'm going to also up that to 4. Final gather quality will be 2. I'm also going to, where is it? Scroll down. Oh yeah, reflections. I'm going to change this. It maxes out at 2, but I'm going to up it to 4. Ray lighting mode, which should be the hit lighting reflections that we just selected. So it should all automatically be on hit lighting, but just in case, I'm going to put it here as well. And high quality translucency in case you're using that. And my max reflection bounces, I'm going to up to 3. And then refraction, I'm going to leave it 0 because I know I won't have any refraction, but if you do, you can up those as well. But those are the basic settings that I will be using for this. And I could even up this up to like a 3 or 4, but it depends on your GPU. So I'm just going to leave it at 2 for now, and then we'll adjust it later if we need to. All right, so that's pretty much it for all the rambling. And let me go back to my 2-pane view and let's begin lighting. So I'm pretty much going to go for like a semi 3-point lighting setup, just one key light for a nice reflection on the bottle, a soft fill light, and then a light for the background. So not like the standard 3-point lighting method, but good enough. And you might be wondering, why don't we just use an HDRI? So let me show you why. So I'm just going to delete this rectangular light here, and then go up to this menu, go down to lights, select skylight, and then let me zero it out here, even though it doesn't matter. And let me change this to from captured scene to specified cube map, which means we can put in our own custom HDRI. And then I'll just choose this basic studio from Grayscale Gorilla. And you'll notice a bit of flickering here. And for some reason, especially on metallic objects, the skylight ends up being a bit noisy. And if I rotate it around, it just gets a little flickery and noisy, and like the shadows aren't very contrasty, and it just doesn't look super clean all the time, and it's hard to get a bit of art direction with it. You could still use it, like there are some nice reflections here, and then you could dim it for like a bit of a fill light. That could totally work, but I just like using rectangular lights to really have full control over it. I could even up the cube map resolution to 2K or something, and that could help. But yeah, you could use this method. Whoa, didn't mean to do that. If I set it to like 2. You could use this method, but I just find it gets a bit noisy on like certain metals, especially really reflective things. So I'm gonna go for a rectangular light setup. So deleting my skylight. Again, you can use it if you want to, no shame in that. Gonna delete my skylight, go to my unlit view in both of these viewports. And I'm gonna kind of use a target lighting setup, which is a method you might have seen or used in a bunch of other softwares when lighting. So I'm going to go up to this menu, go down to basic and then actor, and I'm going to zero out the actor coordinates. I might also zero out my product because it's kind of annoying how it's at 3.5. Yeah. So now my actor, or kind of think of this as an empty null, is at the center of my product. I'm just going to move it up a bit so it's like roughly around the center. And the next thing I'm going to do is grab a rectangular light. Boom, and then zero that out as well. So if I go back to lit mode, which is Alt 4, you should have something that looks like this. And if you want to follow along, you could just model a cylinder and put a metal material on it and then use that as a placeholder for now. So that could work. Now, with this rectangular light, before I move it or anything, I'm actually going to make it a child of my actor, my empty actor. And now, again, keep the rotation the same and everything. Just move your rectangular light all the way out. Grab the actor and now go to rotate. By the way, I'm using W, E, R to cycle through the move, rotate, and scale tools. You can also press space to cycle through them as well. So I'm just using W, E, and R to rotate through them. So select your parent actor. And now if you rotate it, I'm just going to disable rotation snapping. You can now kind of have a sort of target light where you're using your null to rotate the light around. So this can really help, especially if you're animating and you want smooth light sweeps. It also means your target light or your rectangular light is always going to be facing the null, and you don't have to worry about constantly rotating it and worrying about the angle of your light source to make sure it's correct. One thing you'll notice me doing a lot is swapping between my world axis alignment and my local axis alignment, which is just this guy right here. So I'm gonna, as you can see, if you hover over it, it says Control tilde to toggle between it. So right now I'm just toggling between so I can kind of see what angle it's at, and then I'll toggle back to world to rotate it maybe more to the right and then more to the left, and then toggle it again to sort of get an idea of where my light is pointing. And with that, that also means you can select your rectangular light and swap to the local coordinates, and then just like move this out if you'd like, and then go back to your actor, rotate it up a bit more, and now you kind of have a bit of control. And it might take a little while to get used to, but I really think it's worth using this method when doing product lighting, especially for this kind of shot. Now, enough rambling. Let me select my light, and I kind of want this to be a fill light. So I'm going to make this a lot larger because larger lights have a softer shadow and a softer fill, whereas smaller lights create a harsher shadow. So as you can see, if I make this 8 and 8, the shadow gets really sharp on the right of the bottle, like as you can see there. And then if I make this 250 and 250, a lot softer. So let me grab my my rectangular light, move it out a bit, and I want to make it a little higher maybe. Yeah, something like that. And then maybe make it a little smaller. 150 could work. And then get my actor again, maybe move it. Let me move it around, see what I like. So I think I just messed up the rotation. Let me reset it. Something like that. Yeah, that could work. And then I'm also going to change the temperature to 8,000. So something on the cooler side, and also reduce the brightness to like maybe a 4. That could work as a nice fill. Now I'm just going to rename this light to fill, and then I'll rename my actor to P for parent, P light fill. And we can even add this into a folder, and I'll just call it 01_lighting. Cool. And then hit save. Now let's make another one. So I'm just going to select, I think I can just select the parent and hit Control D. Nope. So I select both of these guys, hit Control D to duplicate, and I'm going to zero out the rotation. And now this guy can be our main key light that has some reflections on the left. So I'm actually going to make this guy a bit smaller, maybe just default. So hit those buttons, bring it in a little bit like that, and then rotate it up. Maybe something like that could work. Could try to highlight the text as well. I don't want to use too many lights though for this, so I just want to keep that in mind. And maybe that works quite well. I might make it even smaller on the height, maybe 30. And then rotate it up a bit, and then rotate it around, just to get that nice like highlight on the left. And we still do need to get the text kind of showing, and that could just be a camera angle thing, because the angle of our camera doesn't allow for this studio to reflect onto our bottle super nicely. So you can see if I move it up, the angle of reflection hits our text better. I don't even know if that made sense. I might rotate our camera down a touch, maybe even like a -8, and then go to our camera and move it up a bit. Something like that looks really good. There we go. So now we're getting full nice white reflection on our bottle, because you can see depending on the angle of our camera, we all have different reflections because it's a chrome thing, physics and all that. And I'm actually going to rename this guy to key, and then change the null to key as well. And I might make it brighter, like an 8. Yeah, something like that's really nice. And you might notice on my background, I've got a bit of like a bump map to it. I've just used a normal. And what I've done is you can just go find any texture online, like go to ambient or cgtextures.com, and you can type in paper or something and just grab like, you know, the bump map or normal map from paper, and then apply it onto a basic white object to get a nice bit of texture on your studio setup. Cool, so I'm really happy with this. Turns out, yeah, just changing the angle does a lot of work for us. I might rotate my key light parent a little more. I don't like how the shadow's casting kind of forward. So I'm just gonna go back to world, maybe do a little more something like that. Might dim the fill light a bit more to like a 2 to get a bit more contrast in my shadows. Yep, that looks good. Rotate it a tad, maybe make it a bit wider, 100, and then rotate it again. That should be pretty good. Yeah. And now the last light I want to add personally is just a background light. So I'm just going to remember to save, go back to this top menu, lights, rectangular light. I know I'm kind of jumping around a lot, but that's sort of how I am with lighting anyways. I'm just like playing around with angles, seeing what, you know, reflections and locations work the best. So for our background light, I'm not going to use an actor target thing for this just because it's super simple. I'm just going to drag it up, rotate it down a bit, maybe also scale in the attenuation radius, which is this guy right here. You can use the scale tool to bring it in. Yeah, that should be nice. And then I just got to change the temperature to 8,000. And let me drag it up around there just to create a bit of separation and like a smoothness to the background. So now if I turn it on and off, you can see it kind of adds almost like a bit of a rim light as well. It's personal preference here. I kind of like it. Just might make it a bit, yeah, a bit dimmer. Yeah, that's good. Just fills out that background a little more. Something like that should work. Cool. And I'm just going to rename it to BG for background. Hit save. And now what we can also do is go to our post-process volume. And I'm now going to turn my bloom back on. Drag this guy, this window a little, make it a little bigger. And again, you can see now that we've added a few rectangular lights, a lot of the noise has gone too. So that's a big positive of using these. Again, not completely sure why. I want to say the skylight is just an emissive dome causing a lot of noise, whereas the rectangular lights are calculated differently, because I get similar results if I'm using an emissive light source instead of a rectangular light. If someone knows in the comments, please let me know. Would love to learn more about that. And anyway, back to the bloom. I found setting it at like a 2 worked quite nice, gave a bit of softness to it. So if I turn it off and on, gave a bit of softness to it, and you can up the threshold if you would like, or like max out the bloom and then play with your threshold to see where you want your highlights to be selected, and then reduce it back down. So if I toggle this on and off, it just gives a bit of softness around the highlights, and then I'm going to select this viewport and hit F11 to see how it looks, and I'm pretty happy with that. So now we can kind of start adding extra camera angles and see how we can get this to look nice. So get this camera, I'm going to select it and call it cam_center for the like middle, and then 75 mil, and then I'm going to Control D. Also, sorry, one thing I just forgot, you might have noticed that there's no depth of field here, and that's because I have it turned off actually. So I should have set this in the beginning, but the main 2 console variables I have is, okay, so by default your depth of field will look like this. You can select your camera and then select your object, and it'll be in focus. But for some of these shots, I don't actually want any depth of field, or if I do, I want to add it on later. So what you can do is go to your console command here, and a shortcut to that is just pressing the tilde key, and then type r.depth of field, and then you can use the arrows to go up depth of field quality. So again, by default, this is 4, but what you can do is just type 0, and that disables the depth of field altogether. So you can see if I go to my camera, changing the focus distance does nothing. Another thing that I want to tell you about is go back to your console variable and type r.raytracing.culling, and then change this to 0. So that'll make sure your shadows are always being traced, and if your camera is really far away, your shadows will not cut out. So definitely not a performance enhancing console variable, but definitely good for cinematics and offline rendering kind of stuff. Cool. So again, I've just duplicated my camera up here, and now I'm going to, let's try 50 mil. So I'll leave it in the center, just rename it to 50, and then actually change our focal length to 50. And we just actually need to change our viewport to the 50, and maybe, you know, you want to, let's zero out the rotation, see how that looks. Maybe bring it in a bit closer, rotate it down, move it up a bit. That could give another cool look, a bit more of like a top-down angle versus that. And also getting a little more shape to the cylinder because it is a slightly wider focal length, so that could work really nicely. Let's duplicate the 75 again, and then I'm going to call this cam close. I'll call it close 1 because I'll probably have a few of them. And then let's pilot our close 1 and then move around. Maybe, sorry, I'm just moving it around. Let's see. Something like that could be quite nice. Or maybe something there could be quite nice. Yeah, something like that could work. And then again, you just duplicate another one, you pilot it, just rename it so you don't forget, close to, and then let's try make this, I don't know, like a 35 mil close up. Could be something fun, 35, and then you could maybe make it something like that or come down a bit. Something like that could work nicely. play around. Again, you could use the grids or the rule of thirds to frame up a shot. And then now you've got a few different camera setups and you can just select all of them. Sorry, let me rename this 35mm. You can select all of them, press the folder button to put them in a folder, and then I'll call this 02_cameras. And now let me just go back to my 75. So that's pretty much the first studio setup. The next setups I'll show you hopefully are a bit quicker, but this is kind of the main base setup that I like to keep. And I got to remember to take my vitamins. That's not any other kind of pill. All right, let's move on to the next setup. So a good way to organize these different lighting setups is using a level as a container for all these lighting scenarios. And then what you can do is turn different levels on and off. So you could have the studio setup, you could have dark, moody, contrasty lighting setup, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So go to the folder in your content browser where you've saved your main level, which is this guy, tutorial Forgo body wash, and then right click, make a new folder and call it Sublevels. And right now, all of these things that we've just made are located, or they exist in this level right here. But what we kind of want is we want to have different levels with different lighting scenarios, but we want to keep maybe we want to keep our product in the same spot. We want our cameras to stay the same, but we just want the lights to be able to be turned on and off and easily organized. So what we can do is go to Sublevels, right click, create a new level and call it, I like to call mine SL for sublevel, and then I'll have some identifier for this project or for this scene that we're working on. So I'll call it Forgo because that's the name of the brand of this body wash, and then I'll call it Studio Lighting. And what we can do with that is now go to your window and then find this levels thing and check it on. And I've just docked it here, so it might just come out like this, and then I'm just going to drag it onto here and then save all, grab this empty level that we've just made and drag it into this window. So now this will be the container of all our studio lighting setups, and the main level, which is the persistent level, will host, I'm gonna leave our cameras in this level and I'm gonna leave our product in this level. And then later on, we'll use the sequencer to organize all of them. And what we can do now is make sure everything that you wanna move is showing, so not hidden like this. And then we can just twirl these guys down, select all of them, and then we can select our background because this is also part of the studio setup. And we're gonna leave behind our cameras and our product and our post-process volume because those are gonna be constants between each level. At least for me, you might have different post-process settings, and then you can also make that on a per level basis. So I know this might not make sense right now, but what you can do is have your object selected that you wanna move, right click your sublevel and then move selected actors to level. And then that's done. And now what we can do is turn this off and on, and this pretty much is the container for all of our studio setups. So if I go to unlit mode and turn this off, you can see our cameras and our post-process volume stay here because they're in the persistent level. And when this is checked on, they are gonna be in this streaming level or this sub-level underneath it. Now, one thing to notice, see how this is bold? That is because I'm currently in the persistent level. But say I double click this and now I, make a sphere or something or add it into the scene, and let me zero it out. Now I've made this sphere. Because I have double clicked this level and now I'm inside it, as you can see here, the level I'm in is my studio lighting. This sphere now belongs in this level because that's the level I'm in. So just make sure if you're making things, you're keeping track of where stuff is. So now, for example, if I hide this and I'm like, wait, where did my sphere go? I need to go back into it, select my sphere, and then change or move selected actors to level. Turn this off. Now this exists in my persistent. So just keep that in mind. You want to have all your main geometry and constant variables in your persistent, and then any dynamic variables like your light setups and cameras possibly can go into your sublevels. Now we can actually move on to the next scene. I know I've been explaining a lot of things at once, so definitely rewatch it if it's confusing, or please let me know in the comments if I missed something or was too quick. Happy to answer anything. And this next setup will be a bit more of like a darker, moody lighting setup. And funnily enough, we're actually going to use an HDRI for this because I've found with more contrasty HDRIs that have a bit more darker spots and higher highlights, it doesn't get too noisy. So I'll just show you what I've done for this setup. So what we're going to do is go up to this menu, and again in our levels window I have our studio lighting turned off, and what actually we can do is right click, create a new level, SL_forgo_ I'm just going to call it Moody, and then drag this in. And now I'm going to double click our Moody sublevel so that we're in that, and that way all these lights I add, it's just going to be one, but the light I add will exist in this level. So plus menu, down to lights, skylight. I'm just going to make sure we're on in the source type from captured scene to specified cube map. And what you can do is I've just downloaded a few HDRIs. I have this Grayscale Gorilla one, which is like has a lot of dark spots and a bunch of like soft highlights as well spread throughout the image. And what you can do is just go to Polyhaven, and they have again all the best like free HDRIs, super high quality. You can just go to any of the nighttime ones maybe, and then even artificial lighting, and like pick like a really high contrasty one like Satara Night is good. What's another good one? Let me go back to night. This one could be really good. This fireplace one could have some nice warm contrasty lighting. This could be a good one too, Blue Lagoon Night. So anything that's like dark, high contrasty should work quite well. Even in the studio setups, if you can find a primarily dark one, like this studio small one could work well. I'll just be a bit worried about the white flooring. Anyway, let's go back to Unreal. So I'm just going to press Alt 4 to go to lit mode, select our skylight, and then let me drag this guy in. And you can see a little bit is showing up here. Let me up the cube map resolution to 4K. This could make your scene lag quite a lot. So if this is too laggy, just go down to 2048 or 1024. But because my product is pretty reflective, I'm going to go up to 4K because I kind of need those reflections to look crisp. And let me rotate it a bit, see if we can get anything to show up. And I might just, yeah, okay, cool. So it looks like if our camera is lower, we'll be able to get some cool streaky light reflections happening. And I might up the intensity to like a 2 or 3. Yeah, 3 could be quite nice. And this is where I might also make a new camera. So let me get the cam close 1, duplicate it with Control D. And then I'm actually gonna probably leave it at 75, but also change it to cam under, because I want a camera view underneath our product because we don't have any background anymore. So I'm gonna select I'll go to my other view, go to cam under. There we go. Maybe kind of move underneath it a bit, something like that. This could honestly be a cam close 3. So I'm actually going to call this close 3. So this could be a cool shot, especially if I move it something like that, maybe. Yeah, maybe something there. Could be quite nice. Let me try to up the focal length a bit, like a 150. Really make it flat and like take up the whole screen a bit more. Let me rotate the lights again. This guy, the angle. I kind of liked it when there was a bit more color. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we got like the nice warm light coming through. Yeah, something like that could work really well. And then let me again duplicate this guy, make sure I rename it to 150. Duplicate it, and I'm gonna make this one like a full frame underneath the object. Change it back to a 75. Let me pilot that guy. Something like this could work really well. So if I turn my grid on, I don't know why. Oh, it just left default. Let me go back to cinematic view, get my grid up. Yeah, so maybe something like that could work. Now, the only problem with this is the bottom of our object is like almost completely pitch black. So this is where I'm just going to grab a rectangular light. Let me save all. I'm going to grab a rectangular light, drag it into the scene, zero out the coordinates. Don't know why this got so big. Let me drag this window out a bit. There we go. So we get our arrows. So we have our rectangular light here. I'm just going to rotate it. Sorry, turn my snapping on, rotate it 90, drag it down. Let me move my camera out a little more. Also, if you're wondering how I'm speeding up and slowing down my camera speed, you'll notice here in the top right, it says camera speed 0.059. While I'm holding right click and moving, if I scroll down, it slows it down. And if I scroll up, it speeds up. So while moving, just use your scroll wheel up and down to change the camera speed. So super useful for doing like detail shots as well. Now I'm gonna get my rectangular light and actually make it smaller, maybe like a 10 and 10. And these barn doors around it are quite distracting. So I'm gonna change the barn door length to 1 just so it doesn't look super big. And now what I can do is just move it around until we get like a nice fall off. Maybe drag it up a bit. Just move it around till we get something nice. We could scale down or our attenuation radius as well. Maybe again, move it up, do something like that. Let me see how that looks. Turn our grid off. Yeah, pretty happy with that. Pretty happy with that. Kind of want a bit more. I want it to be brighter, like a 20. Let's see where this is. And then let me play with it. Yeah, something like that. Like I want kind of a harsh gradient fall off. So I'm just moving it in this X and Y axes. And you could imagine like you could animate the rotation of these lights and just get more of like a darker moody lighting. And then you can also maybe model a plane for the background and get like a soft background for it if you'd like, or just render it out with a transparent background and then add it in post, and then you can put some text behind it. Something like that could work really well. And if you want to learn how to do that, check out my render passes video where I show you how to render out all those different kinds of outputs. And let's just check what is in our scene. So if I turn this off, our cameras also get taken with like they're also in this scene. So I'm actually just going to get these guys, move selected actors to level. Cool. So now it's just my lights, and I've noticed that I think my folder, my lighting folder, oh, there we go, it's back. So for some reason my folder disappeared, my lighting folder. So I'm just going to change my lights, drag it into that, rename this under bottle, not sure what to name it. And boom, go to my under, cool, and that's my HDRI, and that is it for our moody lighting vibe. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this next section is going to be all about Gobo lighting. So we're going to do static Gobo lights, and then I'm going to show you how to make an animated one and a few other little controls that help fine tune the look of your Gobo. So I'm just quickly going to make a new sublevel, call it SL underscore, I'm going to call it tiles because I'm about to paste in some geometry that I modeled before and it'll be really simple. So drag in my SL tiles. Oh, I named it incorrectly. SL Forgo tiles. Nope, still got it wrong. What's wrong with me? Turn off my Moody scene. And if I just hit Control V, by the way, you can Control C and Control V, like copy paste things from other levels. So all this is a couple planes, like 3 planes and a box. And I just have a tile, the ivory Zelig tile material from Quixel Megascans, and I've just applied some displacement to it. If you want to learn how to do that, check out my tutorial on how to make Megascans assets have displacement and also make them triplanar. So that's a fun video, I think super useful as well. So this is going to be my scene for the Gobo setup. And let me just go to unlit mode. Let's first talk about how to set up a static Gobo. So if I go to my assets folder where my Gobos are, I have a bunch of different Gobos imported, and these are also just some radial gradients that I made in Photoshop, like the bare bones one. So definitely download anything free online that you can find, or just make your own in Photoshop to follow along. I've downloaded a bunch of these from Grayscale Gorilla because they have really good assets for this kind of stuff. And to make a gobo, also shout out Winbush, he just made a tutorial on this as well, is you want to make a material that you can see here called a light function material. So let me just do a new one here. I'm going to create a new folder, tutorial, right click, make a material, and I'm going to call this light function master, and then double click it. And then on the left here in the, I want to say shading model, we want to, nope, in the material domain, we want to change it from surface to light function. So that'll only give us the emissive color input. And then within this space, I'm just going to make this window a bit smaller, close my HDRI. And let me just drag in a gobo texture that I have. So what's a cool one? Let me see. Yeah, I'll just do the plant. This can be our default gobo, but we'll be able to change it in our material instance later. So I'm going to right click this, convert to parameter, and I'm going to call this gobo input or gobo map maybe. Drag out of this and create a cheap contrast. So this will allow us to change the contrast of our gobo, which can be really good if you want more harsher shadows or softer shadows, and you can play with it a bit more. So let's connect this to a cheap contrast. Hold S and click, type contrast, and then the default value, if you hover over it, is 0. So I'm going to leave this at 0, drag that into there, drag that into emissive color, and you can see it's kind of already projecting it. And then the next thing we actually care about is controlling the UV, so that way we can pan our map if we need to. So right click, type in mf_tiling, and then select any of those and hit enter, and then just plug the result into the UVs. And you should have this node if you've imported any Quixel Megascans materials, because it creates this material function that lets you control the tiling of a texture and the panning and offset of a texture. And then we just want to hit apply and save. And now I'm going to go into our scene, go back to lit mode. Let's drag in a light, a rectangular light into the scene. These cameras are a bit annoying. I'm just going to hide them here, but they will still work, so don't worry about it. Now, let's just leave our rectangular light there. Let me also check what camera is good. So go back to lit mode in our left view. Maybe the center one. Sorry, not the close. Center 50 could be good for now. Let's try that. Or actually, you know what? Let me make another camera. So I'm going to duplicate my 75 and then let me pilot it. It's right there. So let me change this. Instead of center, I'll just call it angle, and then delete the 2. I'll zero out the rotation and drag it down a bit, and then also drag it to the left and maybe just rotate it. Let me just pilot it here for now. So I'll do something like this for the camera angle, so we get a bit of depth in the scene as well. And again, let me just make sure the rotation is zeroed out on that. Drag it down, -30, because I like whole numbers. So that should be good for our camera angle. Let me save all. And then let me go back to our light function material master. Right click, create material instance, and I'll call this LF underscore, well, let's make this a plant gobo, so I'll call it plant 01. And then in our light, if you select it, you can scroll down until you find this light function setting, and then just drag the light function in there. Why is that not working? Oh, it is working. Sorry. The tiling is just off. If I make it 20 and 20. Okay, cool. So I've just changed the tiling to 20 and 20. And then what you can do is, oh man, I was so worried there that it wasn't working. Let me turn down the brightness of this as well. So I've just favorited the intensity, and then I've also favorited a few other settings here. So let me change this to like a 1 or a 3 maybe. Yep. Open that up again. Let me change the offset of the Y and the X, and you'll see it's dragging You see it's like dragging or stretching along the surface because our light is perfectly at 90 degrees. So I'm just going to turn off my snapping and then just rotate it so it's a bit more of like a 45-degree angle. And then drag it up, maybe something like that. Now, the next thing, maybe a bit more that way. Yeah. Now, the next thing that you might be wondering is you don't want the tiling. You just kind of want the singular shadow coming through the light function material. So to do that, what we want to do is, I think I'm using, let me check, search for the texture, sorry. Yes, so I'm using that Gobo at the moment. Because I don't want to edit the original, I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate and then change it to 10 underscore no tile. I'm going to double click this guy, open up our texture. We can close our master material. So open up the texture, and then in the search panel, if you just search for wrap, so they'll have this tiling method. What we can do is change this to clamp. So what this means is it will not tile the texture in the X and Y, but you can choose which side or which direction you prefer to do that, and then hit save. And now we just want to go into our light function material and swap out this for the no tile. Now don't freak out. They're currently, we just got to pan it around till we find it. But because of how the anchor point is used for this panning, if you just set the offset X to 0.5 and the offset Y to 0.5, that will make sure the Gobo mask is in the center of our rectangle. So what that means is if I just up this tiling again to 20 and 20, you'll see now that the center of our rectangle is where the Gobo is being projected. So if I put it back to 0 and 0, it like is anchored to the top right of our light. So if we just go 0.5, that'll be the middle of our light on the x-axis, and then 0.5 in the y, the middle of our light in the y-axis. So, and then let me just make it a little bigger, so maybe 15 and 15, something like that could work. You kind of just place it there. And let me again move my camera up a little bit just so the floor is reflecting a bit more on our bottle. Hit save. And because this is kind of meant to be like a sunlight thing, I'm just going to reduce the temperature to make it a bit warmer, to maybe like a 5,000. And then make it a bit brighter, maybe 5. Yeah, that could work. And then what we can also do is, if you want a sharper shadow, you can just increase the contrast to make it something like that. Or if you want a lighter shadow or a softer shadow, you could go into the negative a bit. So I'm just going to leave mine on default because I like the way it looks. And then it looks like they've added some extra functionality here. So let me check out these. So, oh, you can change the scale. So you can change the scale of it here instead of the tiling in the light function, so that's pretty cool. And then the fade distance, I'm assuming is, yeah, the maximum distance that the Gobo affects the scene. So you could like fade it in there, which could be cool if you have a different kind of tiling Gobo that you want to fade in and out. So I'll just leave that on default, and we can keep that like that. Maybe I'll also just bring the barn doors in so that the rest of the image isn't so bright. So let me just change the angle like that, and then make the barn door length a bit longer so that it's not spreading to the rest of the scene so much. And I even might make the light a bit smaller, so like a 30 and 30. And then up the barn door angle a bit, change the length. Could be something like that, which could work really well. And then after you've done that, you could maybe add like a fill light. So I'm just going to add another light, rectangular. You'll see this, it'll have this overlapping shadows error. So just make sure all your lights are movable. And you can also go into your other sublevels and do the same thing. So again, just make sure your lights are movable. I'm going to drag them into my lighting folder. So I can use this guy as like a fill light. I'm just going to turn on my rotation snap with a shortcut, or you can click this here. I've just changed my shortcut to Alt-E to toggle snapping on and off. You can do that in your editor preferences, by the way, if you want to add custom key binding. So I'll just type in rotation snap, and I've made mine Alt E. So then just drag this guy down or rotate it down, drag him up. Let's see what it looks like with maybe a 2. And then let's also change the temperature to maybe like an 8,000, or like, let's go warm as well. That could work. Maybe just a 7,000, like a cooler light, sort of to act like a skylight. And then let's also up the size so it's a bit of a softer fill. And then you could have like a pretty bright ambient light scene, and then we could increase the brightness of this as well to kind of get that overblown sunlight look. So that's pretty much how you do a static gobo light. Now let's also add in another type of animated gobo and set that up with animated caustics, because I think this is a fun one to do. You're going to need to download an animated gobo, so I'm assuming you've already done that, whether it's an image sequence that you've made in After Effects or DaVinci Resolve, or you've downloaded it from Grayscale Gorilla or online somewhere for free. So get your animated gobo in your PC somewhere as an image sequence, and then once you have that, you can create a new folder or something called animated. I'm just going to add tutorial just so I don't forget. And then in this folder, right click, go to media, and then go to image media source, and then go find your gobo material or your image sequence. I'm just going to call it IMS for image media source underscore caustics gobo. Double click it and then find your sequence path. So this is my sequence path. I'm just going to select the first one and hit open. And once you've done that, you can, with this selected, right click media. I don't know if you need it selected, by the way, but right click media player, and then check video output media texture asset, because we need a texture asset that is pretty much our animated gobo. So we want that and we want to link it together. So hit OK. I'm going to call this MP underscore for media player underscore caustics gobo. And that'll make this guy. So if I double click this, ignore all these guys here. I'm going to select my IMS caustics gobo. And now that is our gobo texture playing and looping. And we just want to make sure we have loop checked on. So it keeps looping and then save. You also have some other options here with the size and rotation. So you can play with that, and also on shuffle. So you might have a random map that you want to start at a random value, so you can always turn on shuffle and then hit save all. Now I'm going to use a separate rectangular light for this guy, so just going to drag in a new one, drag him into the scene, make sure it's set to movable, going to rotate him 40 degrees and up, and go back to my tutorial folder and create a new material instance, call it LF underscore caustics animated. And then in this gobo map texture, I'm going to plug in the media texture. So right now it might not make sense, but when we do the thing, it should work okay. So 1 and 1, and then let's hit save, get our caustics on our rectangular light and drag it on this guy. Cool. And now we've got some caustics, which is great. It's not animated yet. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So I'm just going to change the tiling to maybe 3 and 3. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now what we want to do to get it playing, we actually need to use a sequence. So I'm just going to make a new sequence folder. Within my folder, I'll just call it tutorial. And I'll create a new level sequence. So I'll call it ls underscore forgo underscore gobo. And first thing I'm going to do is drag in my camera. So we have a camera track. And the next thing I will do is go to add and then do media track here. From the media source, I'm going to do the IMS caustics gobo that we made earlier. Again, ignore these. These are some other ones I have in the scene. So IMS caustics gobo. And then still not playing because we'll need to right click this, go to properties, and then in the media texture, MP caustics gobo video that we made before. And you might have other few ones here, but just remember what name you called it before. Cool. And now if we go to the beginning, you'll see it moving. And if you feel like it's a little too fast, you can change the tiling. I'm going to drag this in. I'll call this light Gobo underscore caustics. And I think this one was Gobo underscore plant. And then this was just a fill light. So the caustics one, I'm just going to up the tiling a little more, maybe 5 and 5 could be good. And then let me extend this play to 300. I'm just hitting the right square bracket to change my out point. And then I'm just going to drag my camera cut track beyond those extents. And then also drag this guy to the whole amount. Cool, and now we have some caustics moving. And we can also change the temperature of it. I'll make it warmer, 4500 maybe. And then we have our fill light, which is way too bright now. So let me, maybe, yeah, like a 1. And I'll make the temperature slightly warm. And then we have our Gobo plant, which we can now also tweak. Cool. So now we've got a few Gobos layered on. And then if you want to, add a bit more realism, you can then add some camera shaking or something. You might not have this, but this is a really good pack to have for natural camera movement. And then if I just change it to like a 0.1, full screen this guy and hit play. Now we've got a bit of a subtle camera shake and we've got some Gobos working. Not the best lighting. I'll definitely play around with this and you'll see what it looks like in the final animation, but that's just how you get a few different Gobo setups, animated and static, as well as being able to control the contrast of it and just fine tune it a bit more. So hopefully that was cool and useful, and let's move on to the next scenario. Okay, so this next one is a bit more simpler, but kind of covers spotlights as well as interior lighting in a way, or like a detail to spotlights. And let me just make another camera to show you an example of what I mean, and also just a new camera that will show this type of lighting a bit better. So I just copied or duplicated my 50mm. And again, remember to keep all your geometry organized by level. So just keep making new sublevels and use them as containers for your objects that will kind of be toggled on and off. So this is just going to be my duplicated 50mm, except I'm just going to drag it out a little more. So I'm just going to zero out the rotation. Where is it? This guy. And then drag it down a bit and then maybe center it. So 0 on the Y, cool. And I'm also just going to hide these guys for now. Let me just drag in a spotlight. Drag this guy in. Let me make the angle more like a 25, 24. Drag it over the top, maybe even less. And I can also make the attenuation radius. I can just scale it in, something like that. Around there. Cool. So you can see this is like just a basic spotlight and the cone is very uniform. Whereas in real life, and this is kind of what I learned back in my architectural rendering days, which is like how I started in 3D rendering, is a lot of lights in interiors and houses have different kind of shadows and profiles of how they hit the wall. Like they don't just have a straight cone. Some of them do, some of them don't. So you'll notice here, those shapes are called IES profiles, or at least the file type is when trying to do that in 3D, where a lot of lights will have different ways that they emit light from the globe and have different kinds of patterns. So what we can do is use these patterns in our spotlights or any scene in any renderer you use to kind of give a bit more of like a realistic lighting scenario of how a downlight from a ceiling or anything like that, or a lamp, would actually hit the wall. So this website right here, so good, ieslibrary.com, have a bunch of IES files up for free. So you can just download any one of these that you like. I think I've downloaded this guy here and this one, and then we can kind of import them into Unreal and then use them. So if I go to my Gobo folder, I want to say, is it? Yes, I have a few IES profiles down here. So all you do is just download that file and then drag it into Unreal. And with your spotlight selected, If you scroll down to light profiles, it's looking for an IES texture, which is this pink one right here. And then if I drag that on, you'll notice, and I'll go to just number 4, let me just spread the attenuation, make the outer cone angle a bit bigger. And then maybe play with, there we go. Once it's close enough to the wall, you'll notice it actually has a different way of shining light onto the wall. You just got to make sure your light is actually close enough to get that effect. And you can see here this yellow kind of wireframe is the outline of like the main highlight or the main light source of this spotlight. So this just is a lot more realistic looking, and if I just zoom out even more, you can kind of see it has like a nice inner fall off and outer fall off of where the bright levels are. And then this is another texture, so if I just drag this on, this is a different kind of spotlight, which is a lot more thin and long and kind of a bit more focused in. And you can really get different details and fall-offs of brightness intensity on your light. So definitely play around with IES profiles to get different looks in your scene. So you could use this to, you know, highlight your subject here or act as a cool backlight for the fill of the background. And then what you can do is just grab a few other lights or even just duplicate this one. So I'm just going to duplicate it. Again, make sure it's movable because you will have overlapping shadows. So just select your lights, make them movable. I could drag this guy here, is it? Yep. And then make the attenuation radius a bit bigger, rotate it. You could get a sort of look there for the back wall. I'm just looking on the left here. And then you could alt and drag it, copy it again. Get another one kind of like there or something. And that way you can just create really interesting shadows and lighting without too much work, just using an IES profile. So definitely check that out. I will link the website down below, and let's move on to the final scene before we start organizing everything. Okay, so for our final lighting setup, it'll be an outdoor sunlighty kind of style. So I've just made a new blank sublevel called SL_sunlight, and I've renamed it or named it incorrectly again. So SL_forgo_sunlight. And then I've just made it a sublevel of our persistent. And I've also, if I just hit Control V, made some geometry. Again, the same thing, just a different Megascans material on this plane here. And then I've added a few of the broken cinder blocks also from Megascans. So no lights in this scene yet. But what we will do, again, a very simple setup. I'm just going to go up to my plus menu, go to lights, and then drag in a directional light. So let me also just pick a camera. So I'm going to do, yeah, we could do the 50. Cool. And then I'm just going to select my my object and hit F to fly to it or focus in on it. And let me just play around with the angle of the sunlight. So usually for a sunlight, you kind of want some nice shadows that are a bit contrasty, and then we can pick and choose whether we want it to be harsh or soft. So for now, we could just do something like this. And this is also a time where we can position our object using an empty actor, kind of like how we used the empty actors for our rectangular lights earlier. So let me just grab a basic actor. I'm going to call this P for parent underscore bottle, and then I'll call it underscore sunlight, just because I know it's for the sunlight. And because I don't want to change I don't want to move our product at the moment because it's also being used in a bunch of other levels, I'm going to create a sequence to position our bottle just only for this level, and so it doesn't happen in every other level, so we can just keyframe it and use it for this level. So I'll call this ls_forgo_sunlight. I know I might be saying a lot of things that don't make sense, but hopefully they do once you actually see me do them. So first, let me position our empty actor in the right spot. So I'll zero out the coordinates. I'm going to press Alt H, I think. Yeah, Alt H to go into the top. Oh no, that's front view. Alt J to go into the top view. It's a bit hard to see right now. Yeah, there we go. But essentially, I want this to be on the edge of our bottle, and you'll see why in a second. Maybe I want it to be this back edge. No, this is the back edge. Cool. I'm just looking on the left to see where it is. And I think 3.5 is the actual edge of the bottle because it is a 7 centimeter diameter. Yeah, cool. So now our actor is placed here. And now what we can do is drag our product on top of the actor. And the reason we can't is because this actor right now is in our sunlight level, and it needs to be in the same level if we want to attach things to different actors and parents. So what I'll do is I'll right click, move our actor to the persistent level, and now drag our product on top of it. And what I can do is drag this parent actor into our sequence, hit the plus, and then transform, and then add a keyframe. So now we have a keyframe for where this actor is, and it won't mess up in our other scenes. So what I'm gonna do, I kind of want my bottle to be lying down in between these two cinder blocks. So I'm just gonna move this here and then drag it down, maybe move it out a bit. Yeah, somewhere there. Drag it down, and I'm just switching back and forth between my local and world axis. Pressing Alt-2 to go to wireframe, and let me move it a bit this way. Cool. And again, do not do anything in your sequencer, because once you move this thing, this playhead, it'll reset its keyframe. So before you do anything, make sure you hit the plus on the keyframe to replace what we made before. So now if we do that, it doesn't move or anything. And if you do want auto keyframing on, you can just select this guy here, but I prefer to do this method when just doing simple stuff like this. So if I go back to Alt-4, that looks pretty good, like it's lying down. And now we just need to create a new camera. So let me duplicate the 75 maybe. Yeah, I'll duplicate angle 75, and I'll just call it _sunlight, just so I know it's for my sunlight one. I'll even drag that into the sequencer as well. So I'll just pilot it by clicking this button here, and let me make this bigger, move into a good position. I think something like that could work for this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we just have to play with the lighting now. So let me move around my sunlight a bit. Something like that could work for sure. And if you have your directional lights selected, you can play with the source angle to get a more softer sunlight, or you can drag it down to get super harsh light. Just depends it depends on the vibe that you're after or the aesthetic. And it's a little bright, so I might change it down to like a 7. Yeah, that looks good. And again, this has no ambient fill lighting right now because all we're using is a directional light. And I'm just gonna change it to movable. Now, the next thing we might wanna add is a skylight if you do want some ambient light in there. So all you gotta do, kind of what we did before, go to the plus menu, lights, skylight, and then drag this window up and go down to my HDRI folder. And then I'll just drag in this Sunny Beach one that I downloaded from Polyhaven for free. Change our skylight from captured scene to specified cube map. Press this button to put it in. Now we've got some nice reflections happening of the sky as if this was an outdoor scene. And I'm also gonna up my resolution to 4K, hit save. And I might just lower the intensity to like a 0.5, maybe 0.7. Yeah, that works. And then let me go to our directional light. Might rotate it a little bit, and then also rotate my skylight just to have a few more reflections in there. Cool. And then I might rotate the sunlight to be there. And now I can up the intensity a bit. And here you can kind of tell it has a little more of like a softer lighting feel. So that's where we can up the source angle to get some softer shadows. But again, if you just turn off your skylight, you can also go for this high contrast look as well. So it's just playing around with these two lighting setups to see what works best for you. I think I kind of like that sort of midday feel like this. Now, the only thing that I think we need to add is maybe a bit more contrast, like the outer areas just look so plain and a little washed out, in my opinion. So what we can do is, by the way, if it saves and resets, you can just move this. And if that doesn't work, just hit save. And now it'll like recalculate this keyframe and make sure it's in the right spot. So what we can do is just add some blocking geometry to give some shadows into our scene. So what you can do is just go to this plus menu, shapes, cube, and then let me scale this down and then scale it down in that direction as well. Drag it up. And you'll see in a sec what we're doing, maybe there. And you can see the shadows that it casts. So if I just move this way up and then drag it maybe there, I'll make it a little wider, rotate it this way maybe, and then just drag it here. I feel like our sun's a little too soft. I'm just gonna set it back. Yeah, that's better. Drag it. And then I'm gonna hold Alt and drag, and then Alt and drag again, just to get a little more contrast and dynamic elements in our shadows. And you could like animate these and move these around just to create a bit more depth in the scene. And also what you can do, at the moment, these pieces of geometry would actually be contributing to the lighting of our scene. So if you don't want that, you can make a light blocker material. So let me find it, M_light blocker. So all I've done is made a blank material and just put 0 in the base color metallic and specular, 1 in the roughness, and we don't even need this guy. So that way it's completely rough and it doesn't reflect or absorb any light. So hit yes, and then you can just drag that material onto these guys, and you can see they don't add anything to the scene, so you won't have to worry about weird GI contributing to your scene and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the outdoor lighting setup. And again, remember to make sure to put everything in your sunlight level. So I'm just going to turn this off, and then I think I just got to put these guys in the level, right click, move selected actors to level, save all. Cool. And now we've got this sunlight level. And if I go to our first camera that we made, we've got our tiles level, and I'm just going to close out that sequence so that we have it. The first camera was this one. We've got this guy. We've got our studio lighting setup, and we've got our Moody lighting setup, which was utilizing this kind of camera angle. So we've got everything organized into our sublevels, and now I'm just going to show you how to organize it all in a sequencer so you don't have to manually check it on and off. Okay, so I'm going to start with the studio lighting setup, and to make sure we have everything showing that we want, that sentence didn't make sense. Let's just go to your sequence folder, right click, create cinematic sequence, level sequence, and we're kind of going to do what we did for the others. So I'm going to go forgo_studio, because this is the studio scene. Double click it and drag in any cameras that you want to use in this scene. You could drag all of them in, but for example, I'm just going to do the center 75, and then I'm also going to do the close 2 and close 3 maybe. Okay, not the close 3 because that was for a different level. Close 1. Yeah, so I've got 3 cameras in this scene that I want to use, and to make sure this sequence shows the right level when we are playing it, we just want to go to this add menu and then go to, where is it? Level, I'm blind, level visibility track, and then it'll have this visible channel, and then if you go to the plus, we can make a hidden channel. So for the visible, we just want the studio lighting to be visible, and then we want these 3 guys. If I just double click my persistent, we want these 3 guys, so the sunlight, tiles, and the Moody, to be hidden. So that means whenever we load this sequence, we will have the correct level setup as well. And you could make this, you could split up this camera cut track. So maybe for the first 30 frames, I want the 75mm. And then for the next few frames, I want the close 1 angle. And then from frame 90 to frame 150, I want the close 2 angle. So if I now select the camera cut viewport, it'll now cycle between these 3. So that's how you'll get all your different camera angles in the right one. So now let's set up one of the other ones. Let's do it for the Gobo because we already have a setup here. So you can see we don't have the correct levels showing. So what we'll do is I'm going to turn off my studio, turn on the tiles because that's what we had. And then I'm going to go add level visibility, add a hidden channel, put my tiles in the visible and put these 3 in the hidden and hit save. And another thing you can do, because remember we had the IES setup, we had the spotlight setup, and we had the Gobo setup. So to control that as well, let's say we want this sequence to be the Gobo sequence. So I'm going to select all my Gobo related lights, drag them in, and they can stay on, and then we can animate stuff if we need to. And then I'm going to drag my IES lights, which we don't want showing, drag those guys in. And I'm just going to add a actor hidden in game and then uncheck that. So now that won't work, and then we can do the same for these two. And if you want to do it a bit quicker, you can just select that visibility track, hit Control C to copy, select the next one, Control V paste, Control V paste, and that'll quickly do the same thing. So that means whenever I load this sequence, it will, and then I just go to my camera cut, it'll load this shot here, and we can hit save. And then what we can do is select this sequence. I know I'm talking a lot right now, but just follow along. Control D, and then instead of Gobo, I'll call this IES. And then we kind of want to do the opposite. So turn on our IES lights and then turn off these lights. So again, actor hidden in game, turn it off. So no visibility, Control C, Control V, Control V. And then in this, we also don't need the media player because we're not going to have our Gobos. And then maybe for this scene, we don't like the 75mm cam. We can use the, I think it was 50mm too. Yeah, we can use this. And then just make sure your camera cut track is referencing this camera. And to do that, it'll show you if it's not, it'll say object is missing, right click, cam center 50mm too. So now whenever we're in this track, we will see this camera view. And if you want to further organize it, I can select these three lights, right click, move to folder, new folder, and then I'll just call this off. So I usually have an off folder, so whatever's off or hidden, I'll just drag it into there. And then I don't think, unfortunately, you can't add like a visibility track to the parent folder. I wish you could, but everything in it, I'll just have it turned off. And now I just know these are the things I need to worry about, and I've got my correct levels showing. And again, if we go to, I guess, sunlight. Yeah, we can do sunlight, add level visibility, make a hidden one, turn off our tiles, turn on sunlight, drag our sunlight to visible, and then drag our three hidden ones onto hidden. Go to our camera cut. We've already got the correct camera there. And then you can keyframe your skylight or your sunlight to be in the position you want it to be in. And then finally, our last one, which will be for the Moody one, ls forgo Moody, and add camera cut track. oh no, not camera cut, level visibility, make a hidden one, turn on my Moody level, turn off these three, drag it into hidden, turn on this guy, drag it into the visible, and then I know it's under and close 3 that I care about. So close 3, so let's say halfway through at frame 75, I want it to show my other camera shot. So now you can see here, we will get both of them and we can hit save. So now we've got the correct levels as well. And we've got the correct thing showing in our outliner. And then what you can do is right click cinematics. I'll call it ls_forgo_master. And then if you want, you can put like 00 to make it the front. Now what we can do is open up that master sequence and drag in all of our other ones. So like this, can I just drag it in? I can. I don't think I like that method, like the shot method. So what I'll do is I'll add subsequence track and then drag in this guy. Zoom out. I'm holding control to zoom out and see more of the timeline. And then I think I can just drag all of them in now like that. Yep. So I'll just organize it like this. Cool. So now if we then add a camera cut track so we can look through the cameras, you can see we have our Gobo scene, we have our IES scene, our Moody scene, we have our studio lighting scene, and then we have our sunlight scene. And then you can just render this master sequence out in your movie render queue, and you're good to go. So that's pretty much it for all the lighting setups, how to organize it, keep it all organized via sequences and sublevels, and also different kinds of lighting scenarios to evoke different aesthetics and emotions and moods of your product. So hopefully that was helpful. Like and subscribe, and see you in the next one. Peace.